Welcome to the Kingdom Educators Podcast, where we empower Christian teachers to grab a hold of heaven's hope-filled perspective so you can activate transformational impact in your classroom and community. I'm your host, Jessica Glover, and I warmly welcome you to wake up to your strategic placement as a kingdom educator, anointed by the Creator and equipped by all of heaven to release the radical goodness of God that will transform lives and reshape education.
Kingdom Classroom is here. It's the ultimate course package for Christian educators seeking more than just survival in our challenging educational landscape. Perfect for public and private school teachers on a mission with God. And this course is designed to help you move from overwhelming victimhood to empowerment, enabling you to host God's peace, joy, and miracle working power in your classroom. You'll receive tools to clear the path for transformation, creating a thriving vision, and design a classroom culture that honors students' true identities and hosts the presence of God. Expect to upgrade your classroom atmosphere. Enjoy transformational impact in just a week. If you'd like to save, I've got a $50 coupon available by joining the waitlist on kingdomeducators.com. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you are off to the races in terms of having a great summer break. And I am today having the opportunity to interview Candace Fish, who is the founder and director of Freedom Preparatory here in Wichita, Kansas. And I just want to share real quick, Candace, how I met you. And then I'm going to have you share your story, because on this podcast, we really love to feature people who have like a God story in how they got called into the world of education and like what God's doing in and through them. And so just real quick, I heard about Candace actually through a Facebook marketplace purchase. I was talking with a woman who was helping me buy a background for a speaking engagement, I believe. And she was like, you have to talk to Candace Fish. She's starting this new school. Maybe you would be interested. So I actually got her number off of Facebook, gave her a call and asked some questions, because we were thinking about, do we keep our kids in private, public? What are we going to do this year, you know? And so Candace, I called you on the phone like 2 years ago. And then we met you again, my husband and I, at a educational fair for independent schools for different, there's all these different neat ways that people are going about education right now. And you were there with your elementary principal. So anyway, welcome, Candace. We'd love to hear what's Freedom Preparatory and your God story on how it got started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I had forgotten about the Facebook Marketplace. I didn't remember all of that. So that's fun.
Yeah.
So Freedom Preparatory is a long 12-year process that was something, I was blessed. We have 5 children that are all grown now. And I was blessed when they were young that I got to stay home. And so for various reasons, homeschooled off and on. Our oldest daughter did a lot of acting and modeling and things when she was young. And so I was able to homeschool my kids. And so I kind of got a taste of that. And then when our youngest reached the age to go to school, I decided to substitute teach in the public schools. It was a way for me to earn some income, but also to have the same schedule as my kids. And I started doing that, and I just fell in love with education. I fell in love with teaching. And so that kind of gave me that hunger for it. From there, went on and actually got my elementary ed certification and started teaching in public schools in various roles, and really liked that. But I knew that my heart for ministry was greater than my heart for education. And I knew that it wasn't a forever place for me. Wound up, because of some changes, I was able to get my master's in special education. Come from a background of, my husband runs a nonprofit that is for people with developmental disabilities. And so had a real understanding and heart for that. And so I did that and taught in some special education classes that were designed for students with extreme behaviors. And that was quite an experience. But so through all of that, I also had an opportunity. There was another Christian school in Wichita that launched about 9 years ago. And I got to teach there the first year and kind of be part of that process. So I saw what it looked like to start from nothing and get going. And that was just, all of that just kind of came together to create in me this idea that there's a better way to do education. And that I think there are some solid principles in the public school system that are great ways of teaching. And then I think there's some that aren't.
Yeah.
I think in homeschooling, there were some beautiful pieces of that. And then there were some things that were really hard. And then even in a faith-based private school, there were some things I loved about it. And then there were some things that I just didn't feel were a mesh. And so I kind of started pulling from the strengths of all of those and creating that into this model. And literally 12 years ago, I was starting to put on paper, here's my ideas. Here's how I think it could look. I think grade levels are ridiculous. Just because you're 8 years old does not mean you're a second grader, and I just felt like there were things that have just become part of the education system, but really aren't the best practices for every kid. And, if we start looking at it as kids are individual and unique and not every kid is the same, and we start educating that way, we can have such a greater impact on the child. And so that was kind of my idea. And for years, I was just constantly making notes and coming up with this plan. And then 2020 happened and everything changed. Everything in education changed in a matter of a year. It all looked different. And I think it was eye-opening to parents. It was eye-opening to teachers. It became such we can do this different and we can do it in a way that works for each kid. And I think a lot of parents then started really looking at what are some other options? Are there other options out there? And then ironically, or maybe not, as all of that changed, at the same time, the world was changing and the things that were coming at our kids were so much harsher and so much more. Just the world became the world on a greater scale. And I think that as believers, it was a time of really going, oh, I don't know, this is what I want to be part of. Right. And so it was during that time that I really felt like God said, okay, you've been working on this long enough and it's time now. And I'm going to prepare you and I'm going to launch you and this is what you're going to do. And so it was that, 21, I was teaching in a local middle school, public school, and I went and told my administrator, I'm done at the end of this year, and that I was ready to go and, started having some informational meetings and just kind of sharing my ideas with people. And I was just shocked at the response and the people that were on board with that. And so we actually launched our school. We just finished our second year. So we launched and had 134 kids on day one. Wow. And that was just so far out of the realm of what we thought it was going to be. Yeah. But we were just so excited about what God had done. And so.
And you launched K-12, right?
K-12, day one. No. No, sometimes I think that would have been smarter. But, interestingly enough, my high school group was pretty big to start with, and so I was just shocked at how many older kids I was getting. And so, we went for it, K-12, the whole thing. And here we are today, finishing up year 2 and looking to year 3 and continuing to grow. And it's just been a wild but awesome ride. And God has just been so good to us over the 2 years that we've already been in existence, that my faith has been so strengthened through this process. Wow. Of just knowing he's in control. Yeah. So
I love that whole thing that he was like, now's the time, Candace. The world has changed. This dream that you've been writing out for all these years, now's the time. And that you went ahead in obedience and stepped out in faith. And it doesn't even matter where a teacher is who's listening to this. It's like that thing you've been holding on to. There's a specific time, just like Esther timing, like, okay, now's the time. Here you are. This is the time for you to shine and let's go.
Right. Will
you share with us more about the model? Because you have a specific model for your school. And here in Wichita, if you don't know this and you've been listening to this podcast, I know Candace is involved with this too. Delina Wallace runs an organization here called the Wichita Innovative Schools and Educators. Is that what it's called? WISE?
Yes.
Okay. And there's all these neat little microcosms of school ideas and models. And so Candace, what is yours?
Yeah. So Freedom Prep is based on this idea that we need to stop assuming that every child fits into a box because of their age. And so our classes, we don't have first grade, second grade, third grade. We have Ignite, we have Explore, Investigate, Engage. And so each class is named, but within that class, there may be 3 different grade levels, but it's about the child's learning level. So like
Okay.
right now, my Inspire class, which is kind of a fifth, sixth grade class, I have a couple 10-year-olds in that class and I have a couple 14-year-olds in that class. And
Okay.
it's just because that's what they need. I feel like we have to get away from this idea that because a child is this age, they need to learn these things. Because if they didn't learn A, B, and C, we can't expect them to be solid on point D. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they have to
Mm-hmm.
have those skills. And so we teach everything to mastery. And until you've mastered the skill, you don't move on. And that's
Wow.
just, yeah, that's just the way. It's not about the grade level. It's about what does the child need. And so, you know, within the day, a kid may go to second grade class for reading and a fourth grade class for math.
Mm-hmm.
We have a little guy right now that his mom called me when we started and said, he's 4 years old, but he's already reading. Would you let him come? And I was like, sure, we'll try it out.
Uh-huh.
That little guy is 6 years old now, and he's in our fourth, fifth class.
Wow.
Because that's
where
he's at. And why hold him back? And because then they get bored, then they get disruptive, then they hate school.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, we're allowing him to have that challenge, but he still gets to go be with his age peers for lunch, for recess, you know, for all those things. So it's just really centered on the student's needs rather than a set of standards that someone decided was how education should be set up.
Right. Wow. And that's the thing that can drive us so crazy in the world of public education. It's like, okay, and now I taught this and there's no time to go back to help them gain the mastery. You just have to move on. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
And then as far as like, you know, you've created this Christian, you know, are you calling it biblical worldview at your school?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Biblical worldview.
As you're focusing on like wanting to bring biblical worldview as the basis of your school, what does that look like in walking with God, you and your personal relationship with the Lord? And then like you're the one who sets the atmosphere and then it's like everything trickles down, your teachers, your students. How do you do that? The whole walking with God connected administrator piece.
You know, when we chose the name for the school, we chose Freedom Preparatory. And our reason for doing that was, first of all, that we wanted to have freedom from things that maybe the world was pushing upon us, that we are free of those, but then also that we find our freedom in Christ. And preparatory was about preparing kids to be disciples. That's kind of our mission statement, is that we want to prepare kids to be able to teach the gospel to others. And so I think that the first thing is I really was very solid. You know, we have a statement of belief. We have a stance on social issues that every student, every parent, every teacher signs and adheres to that. And so, you know, we have chapel every week. We have Bible every day. We have scripture that kids are, you know, memorizing and things, but also I've empowered my teachers to say, you know, if there's a spiritual thing going on in your classroom and it interrupts math class, go with the spiritual thing. Take that path. Don't ever be afraid to say, you know what, we're going to close the history books today because somebody brought up a topic that deserves to be discussed fully, and that, you know, we're pouring into these kids' lives and walking through that spiritual journey with them. And, you know, we have some kids that are in church every Sunday and every Wednesday, and we have some kids who haven't graced the doors of a church in 10 years. And so each kid's journey is different. But I think that the main thing is I've really tried to empower my teachers that always feel that it's okay if the Spirit is moving in your classroom, to take the time for that, to invest in that, and to develop that. And so that's led to some really beautiful conversation. I've walked into classrooms where there's just worship music playing and the kids are just worshiping. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, and in the grand scheme of things, in the end, that's what's going to matter. Those are the things that are really going to matter in these kids' lives. So that's kind of been our focus, is let the Spirit lead, and we're going to be willing to go wherever he wants us to go.
That is a lot of freedom of space and time and and trusting your teachers and honoring their ability to hear God and steward his presence in their classrooms. That's really, really special. Very neat. Now, how does the accreditation process? I'm just curious about that part. How does that work?
So we are a non-accredited school. We're not. Okay. So basically we fall under the same umbrella as a homeschool. We're a non-accredited private school. Okay. That is very intentional. I think people hear non-accredited and they panic and they go, oh, my kid's not getting a good education. But that's not the case, because, you know, some of the best educated kids were educated at their kitchen table. And so I don't think that that piece as near as important as maybe some parents believe it to be. But for this time in where we're at, that is the model we've chosen. We do that because it gives us freedom from regulation, freedom from governmental control or input, and allows us to do what we feel is right and what we, in conjunction with the parents, feel is best for the student. So,
yeah, it's so interesting. So like my background is I'm 11 years in public education. The Lord called me to do kingdom educators and serving mostly Christian teachers working in public school, some private. But it's so interesting to me because my daughter's going to go to a dyslexia school next year.
Oh,
the Rolf
I
Learning
bet I know where
Academy.
she's going. Yes, that's a fantastic program.
Yes, and I grew up with dyslexia, but just had to make it. And now it's like, there's all these options, but in the process of that, it's that whole idea of unschooling that so like messes with my teacher education training. And I even went to a class last night with it's like, take a walk in their shoes.
Oh, yes.
All the feelings came back and I almost wanted to cry a couple times. And I was like, oh, the frustration. But this whole idea that you have about not having specific grades, teaching to mastery, like letting them be until they get it, move them on, rather than this whole box piece that I've been educated in. And like, you have to do it now. And then you do it then. And then when we get to the end of the year, you need to check these boxes. But then the poor kid is like, if they're not there, they're failing. And then they're so anxious because the test and the And so it's really been good for me as a mom to go, and an educator to go, okay, wait, I'm going to learn how to be unschooled right now. Yeah. And so it's just really, really neat. Now, I'm curious too. So you talked about empowering your teachers. So as we're thinking about traditional teachers launching into summer break right now, how would you like to encourage them to seek God's face and his heart for them and their role as a missionary in the schools? Do you have a word of encouragement to bring to them today?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I would say don't lose heart and stand your ground. I think that's the biggest struggle right now. For me in public education, I just felt like I knew what was being thrown at these kids I wasn't okay with. And being strong enough to say, I'm not going to compromise who I am or what I stand for because of the push from the agendas that are out there and the things that are being thrown at us. Like, stand your ground. You have a right to say, as for me, I will not participate in that. I will not support that in my classroom, in my life. I am not willing to say this is okay. And that's hard. I very much was a person who did that. And luckily I had an administrator my last year that was, very willing. She said, God first, family second, job third. And so she was very willing to allow me that freedom. But I think that it's hard. It's a hard place to be. And I think at some point, you have to have that conversation with God and say, is this the world I'm supposed to be part of anymore? And for some teachers, it is. It is where he wants them to be. And for others, at some point, God may tell you it's time to move. It's time to go on and do something different. But there's kids in any educational setting that need love. There's kids that need to know that somebody cares about them. And so I would say, if you're a Christian teacher in the public school, just keep loving kids, just keep being available, be a listening ear, and listen to the Holy Spirit as he guides through that. So
that's so good. Yes, definitely. And if you feel called to start a school, write down those dreams.
Absolutely. And come call WISE because, our Wichita Innovative Schools and Educators, I'm part of the board of that now. And man, that has just been life-changing. And there are so many out there that are doing all of these things, that are starting things and, offering alternatives. And so, I think if somebody does feel called to that, we're here and we're excited to help. We're a very non-competitive group. It's very often that we say, I'm not sure that kid's the right fit for me, but call this person. I think you'd be so much happier there. And that's the blessing of non-traditional education, is we can all see it as, let's do what's right for the child. And it doesn't always have to be tuition in my pocket. Maybe it's that, another model is a better fit. And we're okay with that. So.
Yeah. I love the camaraderie. It's more of a unity piece rather than
competitive. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yes.
Well, as we wrap up, Candace, would you be willing to share, if people are in the Wichita area or they're going to be moving here, how would they get a hold of you, find out about your school?
Absolutely. So we actually have 2 locations because of our growth this year. Our elementary kiddos meet at Northwest Christian Church, and that's out on 21st. And then our secondary, middle, and high school is at Central and 235, basically. And our phone number is 316-358-7420. And you call that number and we can transfer you to whichever building you need to be at and get information. We actually are still in school. We're actually doing a June session. So we're there till June 28th.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'd be glad to visit with you.
You take off the month of July. It's more of a year-round model, right?
It is. Okay. It is. We just found that if you've been in the public schools, when they come back in August, they've forgotten everything they learned March to May. And so you have to reteach. And so by going, we have a 4-day school week, but we go through the end of June so that kids stay fresh. And we found this year when they came back in August, they just picked right up where they left off and took off. And so we're there till the end of June.
Oh, that's so great. Well, Candace, thank you for sharing your origin story and how you're empowering teachers. It's just fun to hear a different perspective from an administrator. And then also you started this school. That's so amazing. And I'm really excited for the growth that you've already experienced and God's favor on your schools. Thank you for joining us today. And I speak blessing and life over you in Jesus. And may there be continual growth as more families find what they need in your school.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends in education so they too can be strengthened and encouraged in living their kingdom identity out loud in this pivotal hour. And please visit kingdomeducators.com to receive your Kingdom Educator Daily Truth Declarations, my encouraging newsletter, and be the first to know about my newest resources online and in-person events. And be sure to find me on the socials at kingdom.educators. Until next time, don't forget you are a history maker, and what you do every day is transforming lives.